Hello and welcome to APTN National News Weekend. I'm Daryl Stranger. From 2013 to 2018, financial documents show the Frog Lake First Nation in Alberta lost $120 million in net assets. Band members have told APTN they want a full financial audit. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
That's what I want to know.
Doris Stanley is worried for the future of Frog Lake First Nation residents. She wants to know where money in her community is being spent. Now, she and other members have hired a lawyer to find out. Public financial reports over a 5-year period show a total of $120 million in net assets have been lost. These 2013 to 2018 reports are available on the Indigenous and Northern Affairs website. Show a trust fund went from $102 million to $3 million in 2019. Long-term investments were dropped by $23 million by 2018, from $50 million to $27 million. The band sits on a large oil deposit, but a band-owned business called Frog Lake Energy Resources Corp. Has been losing millions since 2015. The posted financials show the overall numbers, but not the details in how the money was spent or receipts. These finances were audited by Edmonton-based accounting services Crowe Mackay and signed off on. Crowe Mackay did not return our calls. And Doris Stanley says the losses weren't explained to band members.
I want to find out for myself, by an independent financial auditor. I want to know the truth. The people are entitled to know the truth, and that we need to find out, what did happen, what happened to that money.
We reached out to Frog Lake Chief Greg Desilets, and he initially agreed to an interview, but canceled. Other members expressed concern as well, but would only speak to us if we did not identify them, fearing retribution. Lisa, not her real name, says she wants to see a full financial audit. It should include details of everything spent, including any spending by band-owned companies. She says the current chief and council should reveal their salaries, though they aren't required to, and disclose money they are making from businesses. The previous chief, Clifford Stanley, did disclose his earnings. He was chief when those losses occurred. He is related to Doris Stanley by marriage. His salary from 2017-18 was $104,000. with $151,000 in travel, plus $61,000 from Frog Lake Energy Resources Corp., bringing his total to over $300,000. And several councillors earn more than $150,000 after including travel and pay from Frog Lake Energy Resources Corp. Lisa wonders why the current administration is refusing.
We've asked for the salaries. Why can't you provide it? Why? We have a right to know.
She says the people living in Frog Lake are lacking proper housing.
We shouldn't be living in deplorable conditions.
Doris Stanley says she and other members have been asking the current administration for a full forensic audit since 2019, and the previous administration before that. Chief Greg Desilets and council have not provided a full audit yet. Dave Oswald is a chartered accountant and certified fraud examiner with more than 30 years' experience. He says, in his opinion, Frog Lake should be prosperous.
It should be the model band in Canada. They should be telling the government to go get stuffed. We don't need your money because we're a self-sufficient band. But it's anything but that. They are cap in hand the whole time to government because they simply do not have the funds.
His company, Forensic Restitution Limited, conducts full audits. He says he did a preliminary audit of Frog Lake through what was available on the INAC website. He adds that a full audit is not possible without the details of where and how the money was spent. He worked for free and visited Frog Lake 3 times, saying they should be doing better.
The people of Frog Lake should be really well off. They should be living in mansions in comparison to other bands. They should have engineering facilities or some other ways of earning income being created for people to get work.
He recommends a full independent audit by someone outside of the federal government. Now, members have hired lawyer Loretta Lambert to try to force one. Doris Stanley says Frog Lake is not alone. She wants action from the federal government.
So many other reserves are in the same kind of situation. You know, who is there to help? When is that going to stop? Is, Parliament, are they going to help out? Indigenous services, are you going to help out? You're supposed to be working for the people. Where is that fiduciary obligation to the people?
Indigenous Services Canada released a statement saying that they are aware of the complaints being brought forward and are assessing the complaints to see if further investigation is required. They say they take allegations and complaints very seriously about the misuse of public funds. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Frog Lake, First Nation.
Earlier this week marked the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. The day commemorates the killing of 14 women at École Polytechnique in 1989. The Ontario Native Women's Association marked the day by raising a Wrapped in Courage flag. Wrapped in Courage is a campaign to end gender-based violence. Cora McGuire-Syrette is with ONWA. She said Indigenous women know what they need.
Over the decades, we've published numerous other reports along with recommendations that are formed on the basis of what Indigenous women want to see, because they're the experts, not us, they are. So we need to really look at, as a community, how to include their recommendations and their voices, because they're the experts on solutions that they need. And, this is also looking at the same in the development of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls National Action Plan. And the key recommendations that are missing in there, because there's a lack of data. The stories and the violence that Indigenous women face is still largely unknown, because data tells one part of the story. It tells the truth of what's happening on the ground. And, the data tells what policies and systemic changes we need to have. Without this data, we can't really move forward on key recommendations, because the data and violence does not know jurisdiction or boundaries.
A cold case no more. RCMP in British Columbia have confirmed they have found the body of a woman who was reported missing 5 years ago, and they have charged her former boyfriend with murder. APTN's Tina House has more on this story.
32-year-old Ashley Marie Simpson was first reported missing just outside of Salmon Arm, BC in April of 2016, and now police have announced a major development in the case.
I can confirm that Ashley's remains were located on November 26, 2021 in a wilderness area outside of Salmon Arm. On Friday, December the 3rd, 2021, the BC Prosecution Service approved one charge of second-degree murder against 39-year-old Derek Favell. Favell was Ashley's boyfriend at the time of her disappearance. He was arrested without incident on Friday in Kelowna and appeared before the court on Saturday.
Her family says that Ashley and Favell had been dating for about 2 months, and according to her cousin Rose, he waited for 6 days before he told them that she was missing.
It was just, an implausible situation, but think about it, for 6 days in that area, 6 days in the wilderness, in Enderby, Salmon Arm, Silver Creek area, bears and anything, that's a lot of time to be missing.
Simpson was last reported to be seen walking down Yankee Flats Road near her home she shared with Favell, carrying a pink suitcase. Simpson is one of 5 women, 3 of them are Indigenous, to have gone missing from the same area, including her next-door neighbor, Deanna Wirtz, who went missing 5 months after Ashley did in July of 2016. Investigators are looking into any connections to those cases and the arrest of Derek Favell. For Jody Leon, who has been a dedicated advocate since day one, she says there are still so many questions about what happened to the other women who are missing in the same area.
I'm glad, for the family that, they can have, the closure. But then also, I know that it brings up, issues, for the other, families that they don't have answers, and particularly in the Wirtz, for Deanna Wirtz, she was the neighbor of Ashley. So if Ashley was murdered, what happened to Deanna?
Back on October the 17th of 2017, the body of another missing woman, Tracy Genero, was found by RCMP on a farm belonging to the Sagmoan family. That's located near where Ashley lived. No one has been arrested in that case, but Curtis Sagmoan, the son, was convicted of causing bodily harm of a sex trade worker and threatening another sex trade worker with a weapon in 2017. He is currently on probation. For Ashley's family, they are relieved she has been found and can finally put her to rest.
We have a body now, so that glimmer of hope is gone. We will never see our daughter alive again, but she will come home.
So she loved the outdoors. She loved fishing. She loved hunting. She loved animals. Everybody who met her loved her, and she had so many friends, and it was just so tragic to have such a bright light taken at 32 years old.
Derek Favell will appear remotely in a Kamloops courtroom on Thursday, December the 9th, 2021. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Now, RCMP said this week that they have found no connection between Simpson's case and the other women in the area. Anyone who has information out on these cases is asked to call the BC RCMP tip line at 1-877-987-8477. All right, we need to take a short break, but still ahead, a rural community in the Yukon is struggling with an addictions and mental health crisis. We'll tell you about it next. Welcome back. A recent campaign marking 16 days of activism against gender-based violence has just wrapped up. Mining giant Rio Tinto took part by donating to 14 organizations across Canada. The Kasan Society in BC will be getting part of that money, and they shared with APTN's Lee Wilson what they plan to do with the funding.
16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence is an international campaign about raising awareness and creating changes. This year is its 30th anniversary. One of the world's largest mining companies is raising awareness by giving $355,000 to organizations here in Canada.
I was really pleased to have donated $355,000 to 14 organizations across Canada who provide shelter and counseling and other services for families.
They are also raising awareness with employees and connecting with local organizations. Each year, the Rio Tinto Canada Fund donates money to the communities they operate in. The Kasan Society is one of those organizations that will receive a $25,000 donation. They are a nonprofit that has operated in the Terrace area for over 40 years. They offer counseling, housing services, and offer multiple food security programs. Executive Director Amanda Owens says the pandemic created challenges for people to get supports.
When you're told to, stay home and stay isolated as much as you can because we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's hard to reach out and actually get supports and services when you're experiencing unhealthy relationships or any kind of violence.
Kasan Society has qualified counselors with no cost to the people who need those services. Lisa Smith is the Director of Counseling. She says they receive funding from multiple sources, but that is focused on women. This funding will focus on offering counseling for men who are experiencing or perpetrating violence.
When women are getting supports, but then they're going back to a potentially violent or fatal relationship where the man hasn't necessarily made any change to his cycle of violence. So we'd like to support men as well.
Kasan Society supports about 300 people a month through their programs. They see counseling and supports as part of a long-term healing process.
I think women, children, and the men too that we do serve do experience that feeling of, okay, somebody gets me now. But the services, they can take some time sometimes, right? Like we're consistently here for folks, but trauma counseling can take years.
The 16-day campaign wraps up this Friday. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Terrace.
A rural community in the Yukon is struggling with an addictions and mental health crisis. Residents of Mayo are calling on the territorial government to declare a state of emergency so it can receive the supports it needs. Here's Sarah Connors with that story.
These photos show the happy memories Don Hutton has of his son, Frank. A Nacho-Nayakdun First Nation citizen from Mayo, Yukon, Frank died by suicide on September 1st.
The parallel
that I see was a Robin Williams, somebody who was just so full of joy, it seemed like, but on the inside, his life was so terrible from his perspective that he took his own life.
Frank struggled with substance use and suffered from depression, and he wasn't alone. It's a reality affecting many in the small village of around 450 people.
We've lost so many young people. There's not a family in this community that hasn't been impacted by this, and it's such a small, tight-knit community to start with.
Mayo is also home to the Nacho-Nayakdun First Nation. This year alone, the community lost 5 people to either suicide, addiction, or murder. 4 of those people were Indigenous. And the crisis isn't just in Mayo. Last week, Yukon's coroner service announced the territory is leading Canada in overdose deaths per population. Since 2016, 54 people died in Yukon from the illicit use of opioids. Hutton says what's currently being offered by Yukon's Liberal government isn't working, and he's not keeping quiet about it.
Our territorial government has taken no action. This inaction has cost the health and lives of many people in my communities.
A former Liberal MLA from Mayo Tachin, Hutton crossed the floor to sit as an independent earlier this year over what he says was the Liberals' inaction on alcohol abuse and addictions in Yukon's rural communities.
I've listened for 5 years to words. It's time for action. I want to see some help for this community.
The whole community is affected. The whole community.
It's an issue Nacho-Nayakdun citizen Karen Niklu knows well. She's a recovering drug user who's gone door to door offering support to people who use drugs. Niklu says the community is suffering from many issues like the effects of colonization and intergenerational trauma, and drugs and alcohol are an escape from reality.
Generally speaking, on any given day, you've got about between 50 and 100 active users in Mayo. But the government does have to do something. There's just, no supports in the community.
The community only has one counselor. While other supports are available, they're not permanently fixed in Mayo. For instance, the nearest mental health and addictions hub is a 3 hours drive away in Dawson City.
Does the minister understand the urgency of the situation in Mayo and what is being done to support this community right now?
Last month, NDP leader Kate White tabled a petition signed by residents of Mayo in the Yukon legislature. It's calling on the Yukon government to declare a state of emergency in the community. White says calling a state of emergency could provide Mayo with the supports it needs, whatever that may look like.
We can't wait. And so if declaring an emergency gives us access to those supports, then I think we should. Absolutely.
Hutton is hoping that could include putting more mental health professionals in Yukon's rural communities.
We need to put pressure on our governments to get more mental health professionals out there so that the people that need the help can get it when they need it.
For Niklu, she'd like to see support workers going door to door like she did.
The government, the Yukon needs to do. They need to start supporting people more like me, and we get 5 of us in there, and go door to door, build a rapport with the clients, right?
Nacho-Nayakdun First Nations chief did not respond to our request for comment, and Health Minister Tracy Ann McPhee could not meet our interview deadline. Despite the plea to do so, Yukon government has still not declared a state of emergency.
And we need to jump on this, right?
But Niklu says if something isn't done, and soon, it will only lead to more deaths.
It's not going to stop until we start getting some action, from the government. They campaigned, they made promises, so let's step up and do it.
Meanwhile, Hutton says he's speaking out about his son and hopes it will break the stigma surrounding addictions and mental health.
We need to teach our young men, if you're hurting, reach out.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Mayo and Whitehorse.
All right, it's time for one more break, but still to come, a woman has used her experience overcoming hardships to become a financial advisor. Welcome back. A woman from the Piikani Nation in Alberta used to struggle just to make ends meet, but now, after a lot of hardships, she has become a financial advisor for First Nations in Alberta. APTN's Tamara Pimentel has her story.
For Theodora Warrior, money has always been a barrier. Living on the Piikani Nation, she grew up in poverty.
I've experienced homelessness, having to hitchhike, using the food banks, just never being able to sustain and thrive, really. It was always a survival mode. And I know that this is something, a lot of others experience as well.
But she's overcome those obstacles and has now turned finance into a teachable skill.
All of the nations.
Warrior is the first Indigenous finance empowerment facilitator at Momentum in Calgary, a charity that focuses on economic development. After years of having on and off jobs and treading financial waters, 2 years ago she decided to take a money management workshop through Momentum. From there, she was hired on and created Money Moccasins, a free online course dedicated to Indigenous people in Treaty 7.
I think that this is very historic in terms of it being the first for going out to the reserves rather than having them come and look for us. And it's bringing that home. That's what I wanted to do, was bring it home.
Money Moccasins takes place over Zoom. Participants learn things like budgeting and credit by comparing them to traditional teachings. For instance, money can be treated like water.
Water can be it's a very precious resource, and it needs to be saved and preserved, respected, and to be able to use for today and tomorrow.
Warrior says these analogies are key. Financial literacy can be intimidating, and the effects of residential schools have left many Indigenous families struggling financially.
My mother attended residential school from the age of 4 to 14. And we know that they weren't schools, there wasn't any real learning. So, at 14 years old, to just be put out into the world and not knowing a thing about money. And we learn everything from home, so she didn't have those skills to teach. And so it was a lot of hard knocks and a lot of, survival times of, making money stretch for a month. That's just my mother. So when we look at all of the reserves and all of the experiences that, they incurred, and it just wasn't taught.
Warrior says many have graduated from Money Moccasins. She hopes to train more Indigenous advisors so this skill can be brought to more communities.
Using those fundamentals have really changed my life in the last 2 years. I'm just in such a better place financially and mentally, and I have that stability now.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight. Have a great weekend.